Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. If, like me, you were at some of yesterday's events, you're probably a weird mix of exhilaration and exhaustion, such was the vibrancy of what we had there. And of course, the events are much more than what you see on stage. It's the conversation in between. So please, do mingle with us afterwards. And part of this event, we want to hear questions from you as we go too. But as Vicky said, our session is about nature connectedness, nature connection. How do we enrich and deepen that? Might we develop that through creative writing? And in mine and James' cases, that's poetry. In Mark's case, that's prose. So you'll hear us read some of our work. I'm going to read, then Mark, and then Jane, and then we'll get into a bit of conversation. But we're going to try and think about how does that writing happen? Where might the writing happen? Why? And where might that take us? What can that writing do? And by extension, what can any of the arts do in and amongst the debates around, the state of how things are? But crucially, as I say, we want to open it up to you guys as well, so there will be chances for questions towards the end. Anyway, I'm just going to read you 4 poems, and these are all from my new book, which is called Broadlands. So the book, as the title suggests, is largely, but not exclusively, set in the Norfolk Broads, but really, and quite specifically, in an area of it, more the southern Broads. I used to work for the RSPB, not in the glamorous roles and the sort of mud and boots on the ground aspect. I was more of an office monkey, so fundraising, volunteer management, events, campaign, and that sort of stuff. But if I had my dearest patch is probably Strumpshaw Fen, so a lot of these poems come from there. Anyway, I'll read you just 4. This first one is kind of a manifesto poem in a way, not just for the book, but perhaps how I think about all of the things we're going to talk about today. So this is Stand in late May. Take this manky ditch off the Yare, this heat stink of algae blooming. What with all the ploughing to the margins, abstraction of water and runoff into the marshes, there's such choked chances. But in and about this scrutty reed, here at least, a risal stand of yellow flag again. Broadsword stems forged from the sunk under blades that splay to these blazing iris tongues, each with a little zag of their nectar guide. What's to be done but keep going? The world is in such increments. With so much more and more at stake, I tell you now, for what it's worth, here's where I hilt my every word. And the next poem is as I say, I'm not scientifically trained, but I like to volunteer and get stuck in with certain things. So there's a couple of poems in the book that come from helping out with nest surveying. And I'll read you the poem and shut up in this space, other than to say, part of the process of doing something like that is that you record everything. So every little detail, even for commonplace species. And the poem I'm going to read is about wren. It's just a common, a wren's nest. But part of what you do and what I have in the book in just a few poems is the grid reference, because that's kind of written into the record, that specificity, that place, that time, all of that detail matters, even for the most commonplace things. And for me, in many ways, that's as much a working part of what the poem is or could be and should be. Anyway, this is Nest Surveying 1. Note it all down. Shadwell track, bottom wood. This is concerned with time and known position. The GPS app gives the coordinates from the precision of ground clocks synchronized with satellites orbiting planes and atomic clocks. But still, you have to follow the quick of a wren's mind. Under a crown of dew-matted bracken, old blood, orange-brown. A dome of sticks and grass on a bramble crossbeam with year-old hawthorn lintel a couple of weeks into leaf. 3/4 of a metre above nettles. And sure she's momentarily off, kneel. Snake the burr of your left arm, blind to the entrance. Then inside, place a fingertip on the whelm of each. Note, 4 eggs in total, unpredated, cold or just cooling, which is the beginning of an answer to everything. That was April 2017, so I mean, I don't know how long a wren lives, but you can't help but wonder what happened to those eggs. You know, did they hatch? Did they fledge? What happened to that little wren bloodline? Where are they now? So just two more. These are very specifically Broadland species. So here I'm thinking of, there was a comment yesterday in the Robert Macfarlane and Alice Oswald event about, you know, being in awe of nature. It's not just wonder and beautiful, you know, it's terribly beautiful, you know, or beautifully terrible. So this is about an ichneumon wasp, a parasitoid wasp, and it's a specific one that has a relationship with swallow. So if you think of the iconic swallowtail butterfly, this is the relationship between that and the swallowtail caterpillar. This is parasitoid and host. Don't look for a point. She's hinged now, arched at the petiole, the little stalk between thorax and abdomen. Details matter. It all matters, else nothing has or will. So she sprung. Her nib already darted its egg into that pulsing fleshiness of swallowtail larva. This ichneumon finds them in the fen and only pins them down for an instant. Among these few broad acres, the umbels of milk parsley, the fen stink, don't think of it as spite or care, but given and taken infinitesimal materials, time and time and time again. The larva will crawl on to spin its tether and a fixed silk cap. Then under that stuck cuticle, through all the days to follow, the altered chrysalis juices, there's no denial or delay. One will still come, though not as first thought or intended, something secreting. A shifted emergence pattern cut by hardened mouth parts, then a hauling out to stand slicked, sure in its wasp rigging, dripping still with the other, fully born from the other, as we could never be made so young or so fully formed. I'll read one last one. This is about dragon. Well, I mean, they're about these things, but hopefully they're about everything. But the species here is the four-spotted chaser dragonfly, and this is called Where Four-Spotted Chasers Make a Window in the Fen. Look eastwards. You'll be better off on your knees to see dragonflies, dew burning off them and the reed, and the mist from the pools near bank. Fresh water warming, brighter now, golden, green golden even. And then there's this gathered clan of chasers, their braced panes blazing, each backlit node and vein roosting in torpor, still settled from the night. And in this sunk galaxy, they've made a reed light of their wings. Look at each stemmed body, each staunch little clasp. Look again now at that highest one, fully set in this dawn sun, stirring the globes of his eyes. See each facet's gleam. Of all that can be or might be done, tell me again. From here, you know, I believe almost anything. Thank you.
Yes, okay. I'm just going to read my last country diary from The Guardian. But the two pieces are the talk is about connectedness, and I thought there's nothing more connecting all of us than the air we breathe, since it's a product of life, and we are all, you know, it's a precondition for all our lives, but we don't notice it, we can't see it. Here's the ways in which we can try to notice it. This was from Grabbatch in Staffordshire. The heavens had been pure blue all day, but as dusk fell, they acquired a smoky quality at lower elevations. I sat to watch 4 red deer across the slopes opposite until I happened to glance westward. The heart of that woodland scene was burnt out by the brilliance of the low-angle sun, but to either side of the glare I could operate with binoculars and camera. In the canted light, the middle distance beyond the oakwood foliage, as well as the field foreground, were all softest shades of pale copper and sepia. Yet the vegetation, especially the horizon of bent grasses, were glazed in a fractal pattern of splintered light, and through it all, where the faintest breeze had passage, was a seethe of slow-wafted particles, shining white against the darkness. Gradually, I brought into focus hundreds of thousands of these motes. If I concentrated on any one, I could eventually judge from its direction-free journey that it was probably the seed floss of willow herb or thistles, whose lifeless heads spiked out the grass horizon. Some specks, however, had intention, and I was able to separate the dancing shoals of midges from individual crane flies or bumblebees in transit. It was not any part of the spectacle that compelled me. It was the autumnal whole, the way these drifts gave a precise geography to the transparent fluidity of space. Our air, which we can almost never see, was transformed into something eloquent and beautiful. To say I haven't previously experienced a moment like it would be untrue. I actually want to say I've seen it subliminally 1,000 times, but I've never watched it so intently. We know our atmosphere is important and the precondition for us all, but whoever stops to give it thanks, this holy nothing, which tonight was warm and embracing, both protects life, but is itself a creation of life. In his essay, The World's Biggest Membrane, late physician and poet Lewis Thomas wrote, "We should credit it for what it is, for sheer size and perfection of function. It is far and away the grandest product of collaboration in all of nature." And I'll read another one, partly about air, but also about a favourite subject, blackbirds. Every morning over the past few weeks, and with the arrival of that ambiguous grey glow of dawn, there comes to me the blended song from all of Claxton's blackbirds. As I lie listening to the daffodil freshness of it, I try to separate out what makes their collective music so moving at such an early hour. Is it the fact that in order to produce it, air must rush over each bird's syrinx in and out as it makes music, but also as it breathes? That same stuff, basically 2 parts oxygen and 8 parts nitrogen, serves as the medium bearing the sounds in waves across the garden and through the window to my ears. Yet it's also what I can hear passing in and out of me as I lie listening to the blackbirds. It's our air, and only our air, that lets blackbirds sing and brings the music to me, in which the birds and I share with every living thing wrapped around the world. How extraordinary to think that if I set out this dawn and could walk Spider-Man-like up the sheer wall of this atmosphere, then within just 3 days of my departure, I would reach the edge of its territory in a layer we call the thermosphere. You wouldn't find it after what is roughly the 120-kilometre marker. All beyond is just darkness and the dead music of the stars. As a child, they always led me to believe that heaven was somewhere up among all that nothing. Even now, we should bear in mind when next the astrophysicists and billionaires bid us spend our billions venturing out into the dark vault of outer space, that the thing they really seek is all here, coming out of blackbirds' beaks. Spiders have been recorded sailing their silk at an altitude of 5 kilometres, and penicillin spores were found flying at 77 kilometres. But most of the things we should value are in that infinitesimally thin air layer, perhaps 100 meters deep, where birdsong is best heard and where you and I usually sleep. I know now that there are no such things as angels, but were I ever allowed to name them, then all mine would be black with orange beaks.
I don't think I need to explain my first one. It's called, Jackdaw in the Spare Room. I had a feeling he came down through the chimney, but when we checked our chimneys, there were decades and decades of sticks completely blocking them, so I think he came in through the window. But it's about connection, because there is a moment sometimes when you catch a creature's eye, and jackdaws are very good at that. Jackdaw in the spare room. Excuse me. Snapshot. His perfect head, sharp cut, jet black, wet slicked. The grey nape velvet, a bolt of white tin his eye. And him trucking like that behind boxes and old tables piled with books, claws scagging the carpet. His beak a mollusk, fossil Orthocaris. 400 million years of opportunist, spearing and clamping, roadside scavenging, groom and mash, things stuck to tarmac. Life's short, and he knows it. He's young, this one, compact and ultra-smart. He eyes me from a dark corner. There are no questions, just accusations in his pin-sharp tilt. This is one of my what-if poems. We're discovering so much more now about nature, connections that we never thought were there. So although this might seem fanciful, we're still learning so much. It's called Deciphering the Woodlouse. After many years of research out in the field and in the lab, using data gleaned from pheromones and enzymes, antennal tilt and tremor, the thrum and shiver of thoracic somites, we have deciphered the communications for woodlouse. He speaks of leaf matter, mycelium and the frosty light of dawn, of his need for damp retreats and the creeping dryness and heat prophesied by the elders, of the poisons sucked through hyphae up into the lofty heights of trees, that tang in rotted leaves, in the curled twists of those corrupted by their toxins, of the great earthquakes and seas of liquid rock that weight the ground, that halt the weave and creep of worm and beetle, frog and vole, of the taste of rain, the smart of it, its memory of oil. He speaks the histories of earth and soil, notes that he's alone, but shows no grief. We write our observations, analyse the data while he hides beneath his stone. We mulch his leaves, ensure that he survives. We still have much to learn. They're quite new, so on paper, but I've got two here from my latest book. One is about a survivor who's been around for, they reckon, 360 million years and will undoubtedly survive us too. This is about a lamprey, and I'm presuming most of you know what a lamprey looks like. If you don't, it's got this huge sucky mouth with concentric rings of, I suppose, their teeth. Are they teeth, Mark?
Well, they're for latching onto
and they
sucking.
They suck their way up the river against rocks, and actually they eat like that too. They suck everything out of a fish. Nice. It's interesting why I came to write this, actually, because I know we're going to talk a bit about where poems come from. But a guy came to the house who's going to repoint it with special lime mortar. And he talked to me about lampreys, and he said that you call them spitfires, because they've got these 6 holes going down the side of them, and that just led me to write some things. So you get lots of interesting things in North Devon, told you by. So it's more of a fun one, this. Old Nine-Eye, Mr. Lamprey. Oh, might be 9 holes, actually. He'll tell you how it is, old Nine-Eye, Mr. Lamprey, how he sucks and slides his way along the estuary, how he is boneless, jawless, built from cartilage and lust, how he came down at dusk, shot through with holes like a spitfire, a tail of blue smoke spiralling all the way to the sea's surface, how he swifted away to shelter in mud and silt, stone licker, bog snorkeler, bloodsucker. He works his way upriver into pools and crevices, blends in slack and slippery as kelp, seeking shivers of light, mouth rooting the drag. His mouth. His mouth's a horror, a suction tool for cleaning drains or mincing meat. A nightmare shower head in a dimly lit B&B, uncomfortably fleshy. On a good day in sympathetic light, he could be an exotic fruit, a pushed-in lychee or a sliced guava, his sweetie pink concentric rings of teeth, pitaya. He'll rag your skin, silver as it is and geometrically beautiful. He'll rasp you to your skitty bones. It's what he does. It's nothing personal. His ancestors ate human flesh and burst the belly of a king. Some, simmered à la Bordelaise, were massacred for gluttony. But he'll survive, this lonely beast. He'll weave into the roiling dark and wait while we, vile parasites, lurch towards catastrophe. He's played this game before. It's just the way he is. Old Nine-Eye, Mr. Lamprey. And my last one came about through looking up the migration patterns of sanderlings, as you do. Mark doesn't need to do that, they're in his head. But I decided to look them up, and the whole of the UK, the edge of it, looked submerged with sanderlings. It was just blue. It all happened, all the rising of the seas. So that led to this post-apocalyptic poem, actually, which I quite like to write, and they're usually quite happy. So it's when the humans have gone, or most of them. So this is called Reasons for Sanderlings. Their presence in winter defines land that sea will claim. Imagine its rising swell submerging banks of shingle, swilling through marram grass and samphire, bursts of stonecrop and campion, and you gliding like a seal below the surface, past looming ghosts of groins and jetties, sunken harbours. The water will be clear and tinted with a curious green light. Make your shelter on high ground. Take note of the movement of stars, the distance and position of the moon. Take note of the tides. Find sustenance in sea kale and buckthorn, dulse and kelp. In the scurry of waves across grassland, the sanderlings will guide you, show you how to hunt for burrowing crustacean, isopods and plankton. Their plumage will remind you of snow. You won't be able to explain snow to your children, that silence on waking, the crump under your feet on a blue day, or frost on a window, or flying above cloud. Their skies will be clean. Flight to them will mean only bird or blown seed. The hum of dredgers along the coast, their only knowledge of engines. From cliff tops, they will worship the wind. We hold their future like a sphere of thinnest glass. Tilt and hold. Watch how the sanderlings sweep into land, the long dark stored in their souls, their curves stolen from shadowed moons, their spirit from the spume of tides. They've learned to skip aside from the debris clinging to the beaches. They're here to remind us we cannot fly. Thank you.
Thank you both. I wanted to think first about where does the writing start? So not to be boringly about process. This is about nature, connection, and connection through writing. So I kind of know where this might lead. But for everyone here who hasn't had these discussions with us before, where do those pieces of writing? What spurs that? Where does it start, Jane? So take us back to. We had a little insight with the Lamprey poem.
Yes.
But take us back to some of the others. Where and how?
It can be a line like that. And the neighbour said to me recently, he was being flippant, but he said, there are no blackbirds in England. That's brewing away in there. That's going to be another
Apart from 5 million pairs.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay. But I'm projecting into the future. Little snippets, little lines like that. Tim D is fantastic on, I think he's on Instagram or Twitter, and he puts out these wonderful little lines under his pictures. There was a picture of a finch. These pictures of finches that come from museums with the little legs going out and a tag on it. They're so sad. And he put something like mothballs were his eyes, landfill lights out, tring, and this moth. I think that came from The Tempest. Did it? The mothballs were his eyes, something like that. Right. Little lines like that brew away, and then I'll something will come out one day. All of a sudden, I'll probably spend weeks editing it, but I do go from one little lines set me off.
So it starts in the language. You know, that might be.
Some do.
Yeah.
Some from walking where I live is absolutely beautiful, North Devon in Linton, and I can walk up hills, around the cliff path, up the river to Watersmeet, down to the beach, just from the house, and there's so much there to bring about writing. You know, you stand with your feet in a river, things like that. It's beautiful actually, and that does engender a lot of my poetry.
So that idea of encounter, actually getting that and face to face,
and this multi-sensory kind of experience.
You guys are talking about poetry. I have to write an article. At one time, 7 articles a month, every month for 38 years. So I think, you know, we write for love and money. And the idea of having the necessity to write would be fantastic for poets and for all writers. Because, you know, the metabolism of a newspaper or something is a kind of driving force for you to go out and encounter nature. And Maria, my wife, has heard many, many times, oh my God, I've got to do a bloody article. and that is a fantastic discipline. The necessity. I don't know how you take a line like Jane was saying, you know, especially from Tim D. And having to work at that. But I mean, I have learnt to look with absolute intention and to be less flippant. If the piece doesn't move me within, if it isn't a visceral, you know, it doesn't move me, then I can't really write it. I have to search for something that is... So that moment when I was going out and I saw these red deer and I thought, oh, that'll make a great article. And then I saw the light and I saw all these motes and I knew instantly there was something in that, something extraordinary. And it was that I then took detailed notes on while I was in the field, pages of scribble, and that's become a central part of my practice, to find those moments that are worth recording.
And there's that external pressure, as you say, is the editorial deadline.
Yes, that's actually really helpful.
But I wonder whether that, I mean, both of those resonate with me insofar as, and the phrase I use is, you know, I need to put myself in the way of poems. So I need to get out there. And I sort of touched on it with the Nest surveying poem. You know, I wanted to go out and have the Nest surveying experience. I wanted to do my bit, as the phrase goes. I wanted all of the positive feels of doing something like that. But I was selfish too. You know, I knew that would give me a different kind of encounter, a different way.
Well, it's not selfish. It's not.
Well, I don't know.
Well, there's a personal outcome, but it is, isn't it? It is about
I wouldn't
connection.
want to over-aggrandize. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't want to, you know, a test. I mean, you feel overly pious trying to write lyric poems anyway. But so I need to be careful of that. But I think encounter and boots on the ground, as it were, being out there and giving oneself the permission to see and think and feel and listen. But so that's one version of it. So where do you see, what work does that do? So there's the work of making the writing and drafting the writing, making the poem, sending the poem out, getting the poem published, sending the article in to meet the deadline. Where and how does that connection that we're all compelled towards for various motivations, of course. But what more? This is the big question, I suppose, that overarches anything around the humanities and the sciences. Well, what work beyond itself, what role does it have, do you think?
What, the writing?
Yeah. Yeah.
What role does it have? What is writing about nature?
Yeah.
Well, does it not lead us back to those Paleolithic caves and people were doing the most exquisite and extraordinary paintings of the life around them? There's a kind of personal engagement with it because we eat those animals, but in fact, most of the prey that they did eat actually aren't figured on the walls. So there was some other process of connection. I mean, now it is a driving political, moral imperative that, you know, as Jane was saying, you know, that we are entangled with everything and having impacts upon it. So there is a sort of moral driver, a bit like an editorial deadline to me, you know, to say something about this thing that we're connected to. Do you feel that?
I think the role of poetry is hopefully to make people think, to see things in a different way, give people a different perspective. Really, that we have we have bad news all the time, and I think people get tired of it, and they're tired of hearing about everything bad that's happening to the world. And I think you need to just connect people. A lot of the poems in this book are about single animals or single birds, to allow people to sort of connect back in and feel something, and hopefully feel something positive.
What you mean, like the lamprey? He got a pretty...
I like him.
I thought he got a bad deal there.
It's one of my
I love
favourites.
lampreys. Some of my best friends are lampreys.
It's quite a positive poem. That's one of my best.
I know it was.
I used to actually have the nickname Roadkill because somebody noticed that all of my poems were about dead animals, and I said, but I'm trying to be positive and let their spirits fly. You know, the poems always ended up sort of happy at the end because I was trying to put things right.
Happy roadkill.
Yes.
I was thinking of Charles as you were reading about the lamprey, and I could see him sort of getting more and more knotted up. You know, he probably loves lampreys.
But I think there is all of that sort of serious noticing and attention and bringing to light to share with an audience, to publish in a book, and all of those things. But I guess there's always, back to that notion of self, there is a selfishness in me with this. You know, I want more knowledge. I want to feel more, see more, go further and deeper. You know, you can never suss out what it's like to be a lamprey or blackbird or a four-spotted chaser or whatever, but to think towards them, feel towards them, which is a kind of, and again, because I used to work for the RSPB. Now, you know, I wouldn't say this sort of thing in a public affairs team meeting. I'd get laughed out of the building. But you know, it is a kind of empathy, and you know, such as the audience is for poetry, and you know, these are things that you're just called to do. You know, I can't help. That's how I feel and think. That's where I feel I'm at my best, and therefore, if you know, what I'm after is writing the best poem I can do, but it has to balance in some way with the things with which I'm engaged. That doesn't, otherwise I don't feel like I've fulfilled. I mean, that takes you towards a word like duty. I mean, goodness knows, you know, there's, but I hope that makes sense, that I feel compelled to try and think further internally and then externally as well with it.
Yeah, so the most powerful evocations of animals that we have in the literature or where people have attempted to dwell within the animal. You know, you think of Tarka the otter or Salar the salmon, since there's a fishy theme. And I was recently invited to Messages from the Wild, a fantastic project run by Annabelle Ross, and she interviewed me, but I had to be the dipper. And I always envy you poets, because you can be, well, not in the case of the lamprey, but you can be the lamprey and inhabit it from within. And that process of mimesis, that process of inhabiting, which is all we're left with, and which was on those cave walls, those Paleolithic cave walls, that inhabiting of the movement, the grace of those paintings, and the way in which they lived within the movements of the animal, is to connect, is to bring some deep sense of yourself into the life of the thing, and I think that's what poetry does. And being the dipper, having to talk as if, you know, I have to say, you know, well, I love rivers, you know, I spend a lot of time on rivers, blah blah blah. My sound is like a river, and one of the key responses of people to the interviews is to want to apologise, because the inhabiting of the mayfly or the dipper or the animal makes people see it from their point of view. And I think it's seeing it from the other's point of view, which is what writing is about. And that's the connection, which I think is important. So it has a moral duty and it has a moral process, but it's also a kind of, we're here now, you know, you can be a dipper, you can't do it when you're dead, so be as many animals as you possibly can, including the lamprey.
I know, it's the luxury we have as poets, to use any voice. You're always you when you do your Guardian thing, aren't you? You have to be smart.
Yes,
we can be anything.
You can.
I found this really, really weird story about Vladimir Nabokov. I don't know if you know what his passion was, other than the obvious one.
Butterflies.
Yes. Well, I've told you this, haven't I? He used to dissect butterflies, and he was fascinated with their genitalia.
There are several butterflies named after Nabokov. He was an amazing lepidopterist.
So apparently there's a huge cabinet in Harvard University filled with these bits and diagrams, and so one of the poems in here is written from the viewpoint of a butterfly in a jar about to have the lid screwed on, and he put a chemical in to kill it, and it could see him coming with the blade. Oh, that's one of my happy ones, that was.
Yes, I can see that.
We can tell that.
It has a happy ending.
Well, we should take some questions from your shouldn't we? Yeah. Vicky, if you're on the roving mic duties. So hands up if there's any questions from the floor.
Who's ever been a dipper? Or have you ever tried to imagine what it's like to be another animal?
Hi, I just wondered if... I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name.
Matt.
I just wondered if your book actually has those wonderful descriptions of what you were looking at it for originally, because that really made it more come to life. I mean, that's been true of all the poets we've heard so far. But it really put it in its place.
Yeah.
I love the way you just look and look and look and look.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
I think
is it in your book? Do you actually do it within the
linkages,
book?
No, that isn't kind of the done thing with poetry publishing, really. There is, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Ted Hughes, he's the whole reason I got into poetry and then went to work for the RSPB all those years, really, that connection, you know, so... But there were later collections of Hughes's that first spring to mind, where a wonderful book called Moortown Diary, where there were some prose sort of fleshings out, if you like, that would be the sort of thing that would be shared at a reading. But we don't tend to do that. That's not the done thing. But I like to do it when I read, because it makes it feel more conversational. And you know, as much as I love poems and poetry, and you know, you teach it and all of those sorts of things as well, I need more of a way in. You know, they are written to be read and heard many times to be comprehended. So any extra bits that can be fleshed out, and I think that's true of, because we're dealing with knowledges as well here, aren't we? You know, when we talk about nature connectedness, there's so much. You know, back to that notion of awe. You'll never know. You know, you could live 1,000 lifetimes and you'll never know all of the contact calls of all of the migratory species. Well, Mark might.
Yeah, he knows.
But you know, you can't. You can walk along a riverbank, and I you know, I'll hold a couple of sedges in my head maybe, but there's just so much. So I think some of that comes into play. But I don't know whether
I actually did break the rule with this book, because some of the stories are well weird, you could say, and I have got some sort of notes in the back. And I think people will get more from my poems but I put them in the back so they don't have to look at them. But I think it helps sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, one of the nice things about prose, one of the things that prose can do is can, as it were, salt the writing with data, because the data itself is beautiful. You know, the fact that sanderlings that winter in the Canadian Arctic spend their austral winter, as it were, you know, our winter, in the austral south, in Tierra del Fuego. They fly 9,000 miles. You know, some sanderling are flying out to Hawaii, the most remote and isolated. Imagine being a sanderling, flying for 3 days to reach Hawaii for the winter, for one of maybe 20 winters. So the facts are themselves crammed with feeling and potential emotion. So I don't see knowledge, I call it the poetry of fact in a book, Crow Country. You know, the facts are themselves poetic.
Yeah.
And if you choose them correctly, you know, it makes the prose powerful, and the information salts the descriptions so that it fleshes it out. I mean, that's one of the positives about prose. You know, I don't speak too much about how I like writing prose over poetry, and I love poetry, and it does all sorts of things that prose can't, but it has that opportunity to pause, to say, it weighs 50 grams. I saw a yellow-browed warbler yesterday in the Meals Wood. It weighs 10 grams. It's 1/3 of an ounce. It's come from northern Russia.
Blimey.
And it's here, you know. So those facts are deeply moving, including the 9 mouths of a lamprey.
Any more questions?
Thank you.
Can I just echo, sorry, up here, I run the whole bookshop, and I think what you just said about poetry is really important, that poetry publishers do more of what Jane's just talked about in the back of her book, because we sell some amazing poetry, but there is a supposition that people will get into it, and just picking up the book doesn't necessarily mean you can get into it, and I think it's actually, it stops people getting into poetry. And then there's a lot of, we sell some amazing poetry and stuff, but you know, if you don't allow people a way in and an access, then I think you know, poetry books are doing a disservice to the authors and also to the public. So you end up with just, you know, simple poetry that people can understand.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's a...
Oh, you have the mic already. Okay, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I write locally, belong to an outdoor writing group, which Jane gave us a little taste of yesterday morning. But this has been going on for 8 or 9 years, and I've written about 50 poems, I suppose, none of which are published. But the thing that's come home to me is the close observation of nature. You don't have to have a huge knowledge. If you get down on your knees like John Clare did, and look at the plant, look at the insect, then you've got a poem forming in your mind.
Absolutely.
And it's simple. You don't have to have a huge knowledge.
No, right to what you come to know, what you come to see.
What you see.
Yeah.
There is a kind of infallibility to observation. That's one of the first lessons I teach in writing about nature is, you know, you can't gainsay what you saw. If you saw it, you saw it. You have to look very hard, but that's the trick, you know, is to look really hard. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Hi. I'm really interested in the way in which words can actually change the thing itself, particularly very powerful words. Is it off? Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
So I was just thinking, I'm very interested in the way words can actually change the way we perceive things, and that can actually be a dangerous thing sometimes. So kingfishers may never seem the same after kingfishers catch fire with Hopkins, and the albatross will never be the same after we've encountered Coleridge and experienced what's there. Do creative writers sometimes get in the way of what the thing itself is? And I'm so interested in the way, for example, Edward Thomas actually negotiates that, because he teases out what the thing itself is and tries to turn the words so that you can actually kind of realise that what he's saying is somehow altering everything, but is also coming back to it. So I'm asking, is this a danger in some ways, writing? And is this why some scientists don't really deal with poetry or don't want to?
Don't trust it in that way. Yeah, good question. Jane, did you want to come in on that one? Thinking
No,
of
not,
that
not really, actually, Matt. I'll let you do that.
No, that's fine.
I think yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think language can get in the way of any encounter, and you know, if your sense of what you don't know doesn't grow like a penumbra around the iris of light which your knowledge represents, if your not knowing doesn't increase, then you're not looking correctly, because the more you know you don't know. If that, not to be too abstruse, but you have to have a sense that you're learning what the deeper the mystery is. The more you know, the deeper the mystery. And I think that keeps in right balance the relationship with the unfamiliarity of the known thing. You know, all poets write about it, and also poets negotiate it. Someone mentioned John Clare. I mean, John Clare's brilliant at never actually, if you read his Nightingale's Nest, he never actually really talks much about the nest. It's the landscape around it, because what he's doing is showing you that the thing never exists in isolation, that it is always within a context, that it's in a kind of habitat or biospheric whole. And I think it's that placing things in context which Clare does brilliantly. And I think that's important to show that it is always more than itself, just as your words are always less than the creature you're trying to describe or capture. I don't know if that resonates with you.
I suppose I want to take a slightly different slant on it in a way that, I mean, and I agree, and there is that risk, I guess, and there's always that, you know, this is me speaking as a former professional conservationist, is that, you know, why do we have certain species that we find more charismatic and will champion over others, you know, and that you end up in those debates. But with writing or with any of the arts, think where we would be, and this is an argument I always try and make within that conversation space, and continue to try and do as an agitating volunteer, positively agitating volunteer, is who are we as a people? If we lose cuckoo, if we lose nightingale, if we, you know, pick a species, think how the best of us, those representations of those species in our culture, the best of our achievements, how that then falls silent. So, you know, think, I don't know, 100, 150 years from now, whatever, the things that we hold dearest. You know, we talk about shifting baselines as in a conservation science context. So, you know, Grandad had, I don't know, however many cuckoos in the parish, Dad had lesser, I had, you know, fewer still, so on. Well, that will hold true in our culture if we're not careful. So I think, yes, there are risks. There's risks in anything, but we have to be mindful of the benefit of it too.
But the problem with that slanted attention onto cuckoos play an important role, but, you know, it's all those uncharismatic things that aren't noticed, which are also important and can pass us by without anybody. There is no poem in the language, as far as I know, on the windchat. It's one of my favourite birds.
Noted. We have those in the Valley of Rocks. I live at one end of the Valley of Rocks.
So I want a poem on windchat.
You'll get one.
There's your deadline. Yeah. Sorry, Mark.
Go on.
We're getting near time, and we've got to play a film, haven't we? So.
Oh yes, yeah.
One more, yeah.
Julian, in this third row.
Oh, I don't know the names, Mark. Forgive me.
Hi, you talked on inspiration. My question to all of you is, do you find that you're inspired just out of nowhere when you're walking about during the day, doing day-to-day things, and a line comes into your head and you have to suddenly write that down? Because I feel like that's how I am. I'm an aspiring writer, both poetry and I'd like to do a novel at some point. But I'm interested in how your thought processes come together, in how you arrive at your end game. Because, for instance, I was on an aeroplane flying to meet my husband in the Netherlands, and flying amongst the clouds, I was really inspired by what I saw, and I had to get my phone out and write in my notes. I just had words come to me. So do you all have that same capability? Does that all happen to you?
Yeah, I use my phone, actually, when I'm out and about. And the beach in Lynmouth is an amazing place, long, pebbly, and no one goes there. And I walk along, and I find myself speaking words to the sound of the waves. It just comes out of nowhere, and I'll either record my voice or I'll type it into notes. And when I feel like writing, but I can't think of anything, I go back to my phone, have a look what's there, you know. Oh, absolutely, just a phrase.
You might not go back to it for a little while, but...
No, or at all. But I think if you don't write it down, it's gone.
Yeah.
Could I just reorder the moment of your encounter? It isn't the words that come first. It's some visceral sense of something is passing you, and you strive for the words that capture that thing. I think That's what happens, and that's the very making of all writing, is some deep inner feeling which the words inadequately capture.
We should have the film. So Mike, if you could do the honours, please. Thank you.